From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Suini Gray. Another social leader has been killed in Colombia. 25-year-old Lady Correa Valle was found dead after she went missing last Wednesday. She was the secretary for her village community action board. Social organizations have called for the protection of social leaders so that the peace process can be fully implemented. At least 80 activists have been killed this year. Colombia's High Commissioner for Peace has said an operation is underway to release 6 National Liberation Army hostages. In an interview, the High Commissioner, Miguel Ceballos, said that he knows, quote, the liberation is taking place with the invaluable support of the Catholic Church and the Ombudsman Office. According to the government, the ELN has at least 17 people captive. President Ivan Duque said it will only renew peace talks with the armed group once all hostages are freed. Members of the ELN have insisted they want to find a political solution to the conflict. The armed group says it is committed to continuing with the peace talks started by the previous government. They also added that the military presence is the main obstacle for the release of those captives. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has met with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet. Both have agreed on working on new cooperation agreements. Arreaza and Bachelet were set to discuss Venezuelan migration flow in Latin America. The new High Commissioner had previously said she was concerned about the situation that has provoked tensions throughout the region. Our correspondent Eduardo Marin has more from Geneva.
The 39th session of the UN Human Rights Council has taken place with Michelle Bachelet as the head of the High Commission for Human Rights. In the session, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza defended his country. During his speech, he presented a report from an expert that visited Venezuela in 2017 and concluded in his study that the country is facing an economic crisis, not a humanitarian one. The report also explained that the crisis is provoked by the blockade imposed by the United States and the European Union. Arreaza also met with Michelle Bachelet and said he hopes the relations between Venezuela and the UN High Commission for Human Rights improve. Jorge Arreaza is expected to intervene in the second day of sessions. He is also expected to meet with representatives of the African Union and the ALBA Group.
Thank you, Eduardo, for that report. The former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's lawyers, will ask the Supreme Court for an extension to name a substitute presidential candidate. Lula's legal team says the UN has reaffirmed his political right, that his political rights should be respected. They want to present this recommendation in court.
At the moment, we are leaving the Federal Police Headquarters, and we have received on our phones the UN General Committee's new decision, reaffirming Lula's candidacy must be ensured by all Brazilian authorities, both judicial, legislative, and executive.
Hundreds of supporters of the former Brazilian president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, are camping outside the prison in Curitiba, where he's being held. They say they will remain there until the leader is released. The former president has communicated with them via messages and letters. Demonstrators say he often asks them to sing for him.
Our goal with this vigil is to show solidarity with Lula, to send him our positive energies of solidarity so that he remains strong.
Lula is the only one I can trust because I know he does good things for the poor black people who work.
Workers have started an open-ending strike in Costa Rica to protest fiscal reform. Union representatives say the measures will only affect workers. They insist this will not fix the country's economic crisis. Some hospitals and schools have closed down, although government officials say they will guarantee the functioning of public services. Our correspondent in San Jose, Fernando Francia, brings us the latest.
The open-ended strike has started all across the country. Demonstrations are planned in different regions. public sector workers have gathered outside the Costa Rican Institute for Electricity to protest the austerity measures, and others are also expected to gather in the main squares in different municipalities. Some hospitals have already closed, although emergency services are still working. Schools have closed down, and the streets look quite empty. The government says it will guarantee the functioning public services. Worker unions announced they will continue striking to reject the government's fiscal reform.
We'll take a short break now. Join us in a few.
So yeah, national security is one of the most powerful notions in modern times. To swindle, I think, people, to do things that are not in their best interest, and to support massive military complexes that are not in anybody's interest, but that are like cancers feeding on society for food.
Watch a series where the U.S. geopolitical strategies as an empire representing the culture of war and propaganda are shown, and how this has served as a tool of social control. Psy-War, Saturday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. A memorial was held in Argentina to pay tribute to the victims of backstreet abortions. This comes 1 month after the Senate. The group of women remembered 3 women who have died during this month. They also remembered 19-year-old Ana Maria Acevedo, who was denied an abortion despite being raped. They say women like Ana Maria are the real victims of last month's vote. And Guatemala is currently discussing a bill that proposes jail sentences for women who suffer miscarriages. This has sparked controversy across Latin America, and the debate on the decriminalization of abortion continues.
They say they are against legalizing abortion, standing in defense of the lives of mothers and the unborn fetus. In Latin America, victims of unsafe abortions account for 24% of all deaths related to pregnancy and childbirth. Around 47,000 women die every year across the world due to backstreet abortions. The debate has taken to the streets. Anti-abortion groups are influenced by religion and conservative sectors. Pro-choice groups fight so that women's reproductive rights are respected. Honduras, El Salvador, and Nicaragua have completely banned abortion. Cuba and Uruguay, along with Mexico City, have the most progressive laws in the region. In other countries in Latin America, abortion is only allowed under certain circumstances. This disparity is reflected in the testimonies of women who have undergone abortions.
I did it in my house, calmly, with my mother and a friend. It was 6 or 7 hours of watching movies and me going to the bathroom. Movies and going to the bathroom.
In my case, the abortions have not been experiences that have caused me any guilt or emotional pain. On the contrary, they have been a relief. I have been sure of what I was doing. I'm thankful that I was able to do it safely.
I had an abortion 12 years ago. I was still underage. The abortion was not legal. It is a very different experience because I was on the verge of death.
I spent 10 years and 7 months in prison. I think the most difficult moment a person can live through is being inside prison, especially when you are paying for a crime you haven't committed, when you know you are innocent.
Women's rights groups insist that outlawing abortion simply pushes women into taking unnecessary risks. They say that the legalization of abortion is a matter of public health and of social justice.
This will continue to happen. Abortion have happened for decades and will continue to exist. What must be done is the same as what happened here in Uruguay. Here it was legalized. It was made safe, done in a safe environment.
To discuss this further, we were joined live by Nancy Medina in an earlier broadcast. She's a lawyer who specializes in gender issues. She says poor women are the most vulnerable groups regarding sexual and reproductive rights in the region, but she is optimistic about feminist movement's ability to change the situation.
While women are being criminalized in Latin America, forbidden their human rights to access to abortion and access to sexual and reproductive rights. And this criminalization also affects to one of the more vulnerable groups in society as poor women, because not only because the criminalization, but because of they doesn't have access to their rights to health, for example. What happened here in Argentina is totally positive because despite we don't have the law approved by the Chamber of Senate, we visualize the movement of feminism in the country and in the region.
Thousands took to the streets in Chile to remember the 45th anniversary of the military coup against the late President Salvador Allende. Marchers called for truth and justice for the over 40,000 victims of the dictatorship.
Their goal is clear: eradicating any leftover legacy of the dictatorship. This popular Chilean movement continues to be the main threat to the Chilean oligarchy.
This is a march in resistance of the neoliberal onset that President Sebastián Piñera has unleashed on the population, in particular the impunity of those who are being protected by the government.
In less than 24 hours, the Supreme Court released on parole 7 criminals condemned for crimes against humanity.
By freeing such heinous criminals, what the government is doing is creating impunity, something that is expressly prohibited by the law.
The government has long ignored the rights of indigenous communities.
The pseudo-democracy we have lived in for 28 years has meant a continuation of the dictatorship for the Mapuche people. Our lands continue to be militarized, overtaken by specially trained troops that attack us relentlessly.
Together, marchers moved to the city's cemetery, once again facing a crackdown by police along the way. In front of the memorial for the victims of the dictatorship, the LGBTQ community made their presence known.
Pinochet and his military thugs and the state of emergency of 1973, the new majority, along with the right wing, have only deepened the dictatorship's economic system. Which bodies are the most important on September 11? Whose memories? Where have we commemorated the hate crimes against all identities?
Relatives of the so-called forgotten dead stand in front of a mural where thousands of names are etched to ensure that they're always remembered.
A member of Mauricio Macri's government may be involved in an embezzlement scandal in Argentina. The current head of the cabinet, Marcos Peña, is being named in an investigation by Argentine media. He's accused of using public funds to finance Macri's 2015 campaign. The report combed through at least 4,000 emails as part of their investigation. Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Keith Rowley, has made an about-turn on his stance on marijuana use. New legislation could come by next year. In July, he said the decriminalization of marijuana was not a priority for his government. However, speaking at a meeting on Sunday, Dr. Rowley said arresting young men for smoking a single marijuana cigarette is inhumane.
Sometimes I've met fathers who have jobs, who have lost the jobs because they smoked a marijuana cigarette and they're in jail. The children are unattended and unsupported. I am sure that was not the intention of the law. I'm sure it wasn't. But of course, it has to be managed. Because if it is that there are detrimental and deleterious effects, the same way with alcohol and cigarettes, I don't buy it for 1 minute that there aren't deleterious effects from marijuana smoking. But the management of the offense has created its own problem, and this country must now address it.
Hundreds have protested in St. Lucia against what they say are government's failed policies. Opposition leader Philip Pear organized a march to protest what he calls poor governance in the country. The government has been facing industrial action by customs officers. There have also been notices of strike action issued by the St. Lucia Electricity Services and workers of St. Jude Hospital. Caribbean countries are on alert as Hurricane Isaac approaches the area. The National Hurricane Center says Isaac is a small Category 1 hurricane that appears to be weakening, but it will be at hurricane strength when it reaches the Lesser Antilles before crossing the eastern Caribbean Sea. And in Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley is holding meetings with emergency teams in preparation for the hurricane's arrival.
We need to be conscious that you might have some renegade gusts associated with Isaac. I'm told that Helen at the moment does not look as though it will come near us, and suffice it to say that Barbadians should stay tuned to their radios, the television and social media over the course of the next 3 days, because we've seen what hurricanes have done to our brothers and sisters in the region. We have been lucky. Since Hurricane Janet, we've not had any major damage, and we don't want to, but we cannot take it for granted.
Meanwhile, Florence has just been upgraded to a Category 4 hurricane over the Atlantic. It could make landfall along the east coast of the United States on Thursday. Warnings have already gone out about life-threatening storm surges beginning on Tuesday. Switching gears, ballet has taken to the streets in Mexico City. Classical dancers perform classic ballet at crosswalks during the time it takes for the red light to change. Performances will continue throughout this month. This initiative is aimed at promoting art and culture for all citizens. And Mexican youth have kept the country's traditions alive thanks to music and dance. Our correspondent tells us their story.
Once a year, traditions from all over Mexico come together in the same stage. Folklore groups show their heritage. Their sound is the evidence of Mexico's rich culture.
Mexico is such a diverse country when it comes to culture. Mexico is diverse in everything. I am really happy and excited. Sometimes I feel like crying because of how beautiful Mexico is.
This year's festival pays tribute to Hermilo Rojas, one of the greatest folklore masters in the country. The show aims at maintaining traditional music alive.
Globalization is being imposed. People now listen to reggaeton, salsa. We want to stand up for our music, our food, and our culture.
For these artists, promoting their music and traditions is also a way of cultural resistance. For many, this is also a tool to fight the violence that is hitting the country.
We need to promote love. We need to teach our children to love our traditions and passion for our culture.
Traditional clothing is another of the great treasure of Mexican culture.
Esto se lleva, lo tienes que sentir en el alma, porque esto es algo muy, muy grande.
When you wear this, you feel it deep inside your soul. It's so great. You have to love it because you represent your nation wherever you are, and that's wonderful.
Over 30 Mexican traditional rhythms are recognized by experts, a mix of European, pre-Hispanic and African traditions. Along with 62 indigenous languages, they are the treasure of Mexico's cultural heritage.
We'll take a short break now. Don't go away.
The ruling world order has always subjugated the masses. But who are the actors behind every move? What are their real interests? We analyze every move on Critical Move. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
We are present at every event where our nations are staring. We believe in a new global vision, united in every broadcasting. We keep expanding our horizons and working on a closer and better communication. Now, in Grenada, Telesur, the news source from South America and the Caribbean.
Telesur brings you special interviews with social and political personalities. Monday, from Washington. Tuesday, from Mexico. Wednesday, from Caracas. Thursday, from Quito. Friday, from Havana. Analysis about our continent's reality. Weekdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. The U.S. administration has closed down the Palestinian mission in Washington. The Palestinian Liberation Organization says this move is part of a dangerous escalation of tensions. U.S. President Donald Trump also cut funding to the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Trump's goal may be forcing Palestinian leadership to negotiate a plan for Middle East peace that he calls the ultimate deal.
The U.S. administration decision to protect Israel from war crimes and crimes against humanity that Israel is committing in the occupied Palestinian territories, and to dismantle the system of international law and the mechanisms of international law.
Fighting in the Syrian city of Idlib has forced the displacement of over 30,000 people. The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has warned fighting may provoke the worst humanitarian catastrophe of the 21st century. The Syrian government wants to take back the last rebel major stronghold. Almost 3 million people live in the opposition-held area, who at least half were already displaced from other parts of Syria. London has suffered high levels of air pollution since 2010, a statistic that has had drastic consequences for its inhabitants. Pablo Neverati reports from London.
While under some measures, London's air pollution levels aren't as bad as cities like New Delhi or Beijing, levels of nitrogen dioxide in the English capital surpass that of cities like New York and Madrid. Air toxicity has been at illegal levels in urban areas in the UK, including London, since 2010, resulting in around 40,000 early deaths a year. In addition, a link has been established between living in a low-income area and having greater exposure to polluted air. Consequently, London's Afro-Caribbean communities face a disproportionate risk.
Air pollution in London disproportionately affects Black and Asian communities. In particular, we're seeing that areas of deprivation are most impacted by high levels of nitrogen. It's really important that when we have a campaign in London that is tackling air pollution, that Black and brown communities are front and centre at the negotiating table about what that's going to look like, especially as we go into Brexit Britain.
A study for the Mayor of London shows that Black, African and Caribbean people account for 15.3% of all Londoners exposed to nitrogen dioxide levels that breach European Union limits, but they account for only 13.3% of the city's population. Ella Kissy Deborah, died of an asthma attack in February 2013, aged 9. In July, an expert in respiratory medicine stated there was a striking association between Ella's hospital admissions and the most severe episodes of air pollution around her home in South London. Now, Ella's mum has called for an independent investigation into the relationship between air pollution levels and the death of her daughter.
I don't think most people in London are aware of the fact that they're walking around breathing in illegal levels of air pollution. And I think we need to be frank about the fact that air pollution can kill. And when we look at who it kills, it disproportionately kills and harms and has sort of health problems for black and brown communities and working class people.
Of the 40,000 early deaths a year that have been attributed to toxic air levels in the UK, an estimated 10,000 occur in London. While there has been a small improvement in results this year, clean air plans put forward by government ministers have already twice been declared illegal at the High Court for failing to cut air pollution in the shortest time possible, as European Union law requires. In September last year, the UN Special Rapporteur on Pollution said the government was flouting its duty to protect the lives and health of its citizens. The government is now awaiting the verdict in a third case presented by a group of environmental lawyers. Meanwhile, Londoners, and especially the city's African and Caribbean communities, will continue to suffer the impacts of toxic air. Pablo Navarrete, Telesur, London.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe has said he will discuss a peace treaty with Russia. He met with President Vladimir Putin to discuss the treaty as well as military cooperation. The countries have not signed a peace treaty since World War II. Abe announced the talks during his opening remarks at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Russia. Over 700 dancers have performed outside Paris's town hall. Professionals and amateurs joined in to perform choreography by the English-Bangladeshi Akram Khan. Khan explains this dance is just an excuse for people to come together in a moment when the political situation in the world is breaking down. What an amazing performance. We've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talsyotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talsyo English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you for watching.